Welcome back to the Chattable podcast, where we learn real English in real life and have fun and be proud.
Glad to be here for another one.
Yeah, and if you're listening right now, you already know mastering English isn't just about memorizing textbooks. It's about the culture and the everyday experiences behind the words. So today, we have a very specific mission for you.
We do.
We're going to decode how transportation, specifically driving a car, has heavily influenced everyday English. We're walking through 3 specific driving metaphors that are absolutely crucial for your vocabulary.
And what's so fascinating about these phrases is they aren't just vocabulary. They actually reveal a tremendous amount about how modern society views work, how we establish boundaries, and
how we view human energy, right?
Exactly. It's language acting as a mirror for our culture.
I love that. I love when we can connect the words we use to the physical world. So let's jump right into the first part of this episode. The phrase is, take your foot off the gas.
Right. Take your foot off the gas.
Let's start with the physical mechanics, just to make sure we're all picturing the exact same thing. When you're sitting in a car, the gas pedal is your accelerator. You push it down, you go faster.
Accelerate, yeah.
But when you physically take your foot off that pedal, the car doesn't instantly stop. It naturally, gradually slows down because of friction and wind resistance. It loses momentum.
Right, it loses momentum.
Yeah.
And if we connect this to the metaphorical translation, the vibe of this phrase is incredibly evocative. The underlying tone is intrinsically tied to environments that are fast-paced, intense, and relentless.
Relentless is a good word for it.
Yeah, situations that simply never stop. When we say someone is taking their foot off the gas in everyday English, we're describing someone who is finally slowing their progress, reducing their effort, or taking a break after an intense period of hard work.
It's such a visual idiom. You can almost feel the tension releasing in your leg just thinking about it.
You really can.
But I want to push back on something here, or at least clarify. The way you describe it makes it sound like a relief. But in my experience, people don't really use this phrase for someone who's casually strolling through life.
No, definitely not.
You use it for high achievers. It's often used almost as a warning, isn't it?
That is a really sharp observation. You'll hear this phrase used most heavily in highly competitive environments. Corporate business, the startup world, professional sports.
Yeah.
It perfectly describes a workaholic who simply refuses to slow down, or a dominant sports team that keeps scoring and refuses to let the opponent recover.
Right, because friction exists. In a car, wind resistance and the friction of the tires on the asphalt will eventually bring you to a halt if you aren't actively applying gas.
Precisely. And in business, market competition is that friction.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
If you take your foot off the gas, your competitors are going to fly right past you. It raises an important point about modern work culture. We use the language of combustion engines to describe human output. We equate explosive, continuous mechanical energy with a strong work ethic.
We really do. When we say someone hasn't taken their foot off the gas, we say it with admiration, mixed with a little concern for their well-being maybe, but mostly admiration.
It's a testament to human endurance. In a startup, taking your foot off the gas doesn't mean you've crashed the car, it just means you're coasting.
Yeah.
But in a hyper-competitive world, coasting is viewed as falling behind.
You are the driver of your own success, so if you aren't pressing the pedal, you aren't succeeding.
Exactly.
That makes total sense. Think about a fiercely dedicated entrepreneur, let's say Elon, for example.
Sure.
If you want to explain his intense work ethic to a friend, you wouldn't just say he works hard. That doesn't capture the momentum.
It's too passive.
Right. Instead, you'd say something like, since he started his rocket company 5 years ago, he hasn't been able to take his foot off the gas, not a single day for vacation.
And notice how that perfectly captures the relentless nature of his life. It paints a picture of someone who has their foot pinned to the floorboard for 5 straight years.
It's exhausting just to think about.
Yeah.
But let's make this practical for you listening. If you're an English learner trying to use this in a professional setting, how does it actually sound? Let's say you're a manager, and your team just finished a massive, stressful project.
Well, in that context, you might use it to give your team permission to relax. You could say, great job, everyone, for the next week. Let's take our foot off the gas and just focus on catching up on emails.
That shows the phrase isn't always negative. It can be a deliberate choice to slow down. But what if you're talking about a competitor?
Then the connotations shift entirely. If a rival company is disorganized, you might say to your sales team, this is not the time to take our foot off the gas. We need to push harder.
It's all about context and intonation. You hear it constantly in sports commentary, too. A team is leading by 30 points, they secure the win, so they take their foot off the gas and put in the backup players.
It's highly versatile. But the key takeaway for you as a listener is that it always implies a transition from high intensity to lower intensity.
Yeah.
You can't take your foot off the gas if you are already parked.
You have to have prior momentum. I love that.
Exactly.
So if we think about moving that fast, it naturally leads us to the next part of our discussion. When everyone is flying down the highway at top speed, you need boundaries to prevent total chaos.
You really do.
And that brings us to the second phrase in this episode, stay in your lane.
This one is absolutely fascinating, especially when we look at how its usage has evolved over the last decade.
Let's start with the literal meaning again.
Sure, it's rooted in basic road safety. Think about driving on a busy, multi-lane highway. Everyone is moving fast. If you suddenly swerve into another lane without looking, you're going to cause an accident. Safety relies entirely on a mutual agreement that everyone will stay in their designated lane.
The lanes organize the chaos, but socially, this phrase has exploded in popularity recently.
It really has. It's evolved to mean sticking to the topics or tasks that you actually know about, and crucially, not interfering in areas outside your expertise.
I'd imagine the internet and social media have a lot to do with that, right?
Oh, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Historically, you only discussed highly complex topics if you were in a room full of experts. Now, everyone with a smartphone can publicly share an opinion on global events. Stay in your lane has emerged as a societal defense mechanism against that chaos.
A defense mechanism, yeah. Because the vibe of this phrase is very specific. It's direct, it's cautionary, and it can be a bit blunt. It's a polite but firm way to say mind your own business.
It acts as a conversational stop sign.
A conversational stop sign, I like that.
And it works because of the underlying metaphor. When you tell someone to stay in their lane, you aren't necessarily saying their opinion is objectively wrong, implying that their interference is disruptive. Like a car swerving on a highway, it's potentially damaging to the conversation.
Let's give you a real-world scenario so you can hear how this sounds in practice. Let's say you have a brilliant friend named John. Now, John is incredibly smart in his field, but he's stepping into a messy topic that he genuinely knows nothing about.
A classic situation.
Right. You might need to give him some friendly, firm advice, you could say. You are a Nobel Prize winning scientist, John. Politics isn't where you want to dive into. I'd say you should just stay in your lane and not speak much about politics.
That's a fantastic example. It highlights the nuance perfectly. Telling John to stay in his lane isn't an insult to his intelligence. He's a Nobel-winning scientist.
He's objectively brilliant.
Right, but his brilliance is specific to his lane. The advice is protective. You're saying you are safe and authoritative in your lane. If you swerve into politics without the right context, you're going to cause a crash and damage your reputation.
We see this dynamic play out all the time in pop culture. Actors giving medical advice, or tech billionaires trying to solve complex sociological problems.
And the public's response is usually, please, stay in your lane.
It's a boundary-setting tool.
It absolutely is. And on a deeper level, it encourages self-awareness. It combats the Dunning-Kruger effect, where people with limited knowledge overestimate their competence. Before we swerve into a debate, we have to ask ourselves, have I actually studied this?
Or did I just read one article about it?
Exactly. If I just read one article, the most constructive thing I can do is stay in my lane and let the actual drivers navigate.
But let me play devil's advocate for a second. Can this phrase be used negatively? Because it sounds like it could easily be used to shut down valid questions.
Oh, certainly. That's where you, as a learner, need to be careful. It can be used defensively by people in power to dismiss legitimate criticism. If a junior employee raises an ethical concern, a toxic manager might just say, do your job and stay in your lane.
So in that context, it's oppressive, not protective.
Right. It's a way of saying don't question authority.
So what does this mean for you listening and trying to use this in real life? It means you need to be aware of its edge. It's a fantastic tool, but it carries a blunt tone.
You definitely want to use it carefully. Sometimes you need the boundary without the bluntness. Like, let's say a colleague from marketing starts trying to rewrite your software code.
Right. I wouldn't just look at them and say, stay in your lane. That's way too aggressive for the office.
So what would you do?
I might apply it to myself to soften the blow. I could say, I appreciate the input, but I usually try to stay in my lane when it comes to the marketing copy, so I'd love it if we could trust my expertise on the CODA side.
That is a brilliant tactical use of the phrase. By applying the rule to yourself first, You establish a standard of mutual respect. You enforce the boundary, but as a professional courtesy.
It's all about the delivery. Okay, so we've talked about the speed of the car, we've talked about the boundaries on the road, but none of this matters if the car doesn't have the energy to move.
That is very true.
Which brings us to our final phrase for this episode. Run out of fuel, or the very common variation, run out of gas.
Yes. Let's look at the literal mechanics first. Anyone who has ever ignored that little glowing light on their dashboard knows this feeling of dread. It's when the engine completely shuts down because the gas tank has hit absolute empty.
The machine literally cannot function anymore.
Right. There's no more combustible material to create forward motion. Doesn't matter how hard you press the pedal, nothing happens.
And the metaphorical translation of that failure draws a direct, deeply emotional parallel to the human body and mind. When you say you have run out of gas, it means you have completely depleted your physical energy, your mental focus, or your motivation.
It's not just being a little tired. The vibe here is sheer, undeniable exhaustion.
It's dragging yourself to the finish line on fumes.
Think about how you feel after a grueling 10-hour shift or studying all night for an exam. Your brain physically feels heavy. It feels empty. That's what we mean. You aren't being lazy. Your biological tank is literally at zero.
It's a very universal feeling, and it's used heavily in sports commentary. Broadcasters use it for an athlete who starts out incredibly strong, dominates the first half, but then their body simply hits a biological wall.
They tire out. Their legs get heavy. And you hear it at work or school, too. You're dragging through the final steps of a long project. The finish line is right there, but you just don't have the mental energy to look at a spreadsheet for one more second.
You've run out of gas.
You've run out of gas.
This brings up a fantastic illustrative example for you listening. This phrase is incredibly useful when discussing the physical limits of aging athletes.
Let's hear it.
Imagine listening to a sports analyst break down a tennis tournament, they might say. 24-time Grand Slam winner, Novak Djokovic hasn't won a major title for 2 years, mostly because of his age. He also admitted that now it's far easier for him to run out of fuel in the later stages of a Grand Slam tournament.
That quote is highly revealing. It emphasizes that Djokovic is still a legendary champion. He still has the perfect technique, the muscle memory, the tactical brilliance.
He hasn't forgotten how to play tennis.
Exactly. But he has hit an unavoidable physical limit. Just like a perfectly engineered million-dollar sports car cannot drive a single inch without fuel, even the greatest athlete cannot compete when their biological tank is empty.
What I love about that is the implicit empathy within the metaphor. When an engine runs out of gas, we don't blame the engine for being defective or lazy.
Right, we don't judge the machine.
We acknowledge that it simply consumed all its available resources to do the work we asked of it. When we apply this to a person, it removes a layer of harsh judgment.
It isn't a failure of character. It's just a reality of biology. It grants us permission to be human by comparing us to machines, ironically enough. We're acknowledging that human energy is a finite resource.
And I think it's important to contrast this with our first phrase to really get the nuance. There's a huge difference between taking your foot off the gas and running out of gas. How would you explain that difference?
It all comes down to agency and choice. Taking your foot off the gas is a deliberate decision. You are choosing to reduce your effort, maybe to preserve your health.
Or because the job is done.
Exactly. But running out of gas is entirely involuntary. Your body or your mind makes the choice for you because the resources are simply gone. You want to keep going, you might even still be pressing the pedal, but there's nothing left in the tank.
Let's do another quick scenario for our listeners so they can practice this. Imagine you're talking to your boss. You've been working overtime for 3 weeks straight, and they ask you to take on another project this weekend.
A tough spot to be in.
You want to say no, but you want to sound professional, not uncooperative.
Using this idiom is perfect for that situation because of the empathy we just discussed. Instead of saying, I refuse to work this weekend, which sounds combative, you could say, I'd love to help, but I've been working late all month, and I've honestly completely run out of gas. If I take this on, I won't be able to give it the quality it deserves. I need the weekend to refuel.
Refuel. That is a great extension of the metaphor. By saying you've run out of gas, you're communicating that your boundary isn't a lack of dedication, it's a lack of capacity.
You're an empty tank. You're managing expectations using a framework that everyone instantly understands. Both phrases rely on this underlying cultural assumption that human beings operate like combustion engines. We require fuel, we generate power, we maintain momentum, and eventually we need to stop.
This has been such a revealing look at how we use language. We don't just use words to point at things, we use them to map our understanding of the physical world onto our emotional and professional lives.
And that is the ultimate goal of mastering a language. It's not just grammatical correctness, it's cultural fluency.
So, to connect this all back to you, the listener, these 3 phrases, taking your foot off the gas, staying in your lane, and running out of fuel, they do so much more than just translate to slowing down, minding your business, or getting tired.
They paint vivid, instantly recognizable pictures in the mind of the person you're talking to.
They're narrative shortcuts. They save you from having to over-explain your feelings or boundaries. And I strongly encourage you to actively listen for these phrases in your daily life.
You will start hearing them everywhere, in business meetings, during sports broadcasts, on the news, watching your favorite English shows. Once you tune your ear to them, you'll realize how ubiquitous this driving terminology really is.
It really is everywhere once you start looking for it. Now, as we wrap up this episode, we always like to leave you with something to chew on, a thought to take with you beyond the vocabulary lesson.
We've spent this entire episode exploring how we've built our modern vocabulary around combustion engines, physical lanes, and gas pedals. But here is a final provocative question to ponder. As the world rapidly shifts away from fossil fuels toward self-driving technology and silent electric vehicles, vehicles that don't have gas or gears in the traditional sense, will our language eventually evolve to reflect a different kind of progress? Or are we permanently wired, culturally speaking, to think of human energy and effort as a literal gas tank waiting to be emptied?
Oh, wow, that's deep. In 20 years, will we be telling people their software needs an update instead of saying they're out of gas?
Right. Or will we tell people to recharge their battery cells?
That is a fascinating thought to leave on. Thank you so much for joining us on the Chattable podcast today. Keep listening, keep practicing those idioms, and we will see you in the next episode.